Welcome to Nomads of the Noetic with Randall Brown and Trace Pirtle. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Alyssa Arredondo. And we have a special topic today as well. We're going to be discussing AI-generated people.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Trace and Randy coming to you again on a beautiful Thursday afternoon in Texas, United States of America, Earth. Today, Randy and I have a very special guest. Some of you might be thinking, hey, it's about time these guys are having some guest on because this is the first one, isn't it, Randy?
That's right.
First person. So we have with us Alyssa Arredondo, also in Laredo, Texas. Alyssa and I have some history that goes back quite a few years, just like with Randy. And so it's great to be able to connect with her on this particular show. And so what happened was, I think it was like maybe Sunday or so, Alyssa sent me a link and she said, you know what, this might be interesting for Nomads of the Noetic. And so I looked at this, this NPR article, and the title of it was Chinese Companies Offer to Resurrect Deceased Loved Ones with AI Avatars. So I immediately shot that over to Randy and I said, man, this is something we got to talk about, and of course we have to get Alyssa on to talk about it from her perspective. So here we
Sure.
are. Yep.
You know, I clicked on that article as soon as you forwarded that to me, Trace, and I I I read it and I thought, well, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
But then I even wanted to debate the title before I even got started, which is uh, I I always start there because then I wanted to know, okay, should it be resurrect or resuscitate
Hmm.
or duplicate? Or what is this that we're really talking about?
Exactly.
But anyways, fascinating.
Yeah. So, Alyssa, what was it about that that really caught your attention?
Well, and I love the point that Randall makes. I I think it resonated with me because a year ago, in June, I lost my mom,
Mhm.
and I've gone back and listened to maybe I've got some voicemail messages that maybe a recording of a conversation that we had as her health declined in the latter part of her life. I wanted some things to keep to kind of keep her present in a sense. And I started to read this article and thought, wow, I can completely understand the value in being able to do this. The article talks about a gentleman who essentially has this digital sort of version of his mother that he talks to as if it was her. And he's an executive at this company that puts this together.
Mhm.
And for I want to say about $30, you can have this sort of keepsake that he can interact with whenever he wants to share his thoughts and feel like this loved one hasn't passed on.
Yeah.
As you read the rest of the article, though, there are certainly some ethical implications, some concerns around, maybe identity theft.
Mhm.
There was a story further in the article that talked about someone whose I want to say the grandmother had been hospitalized. She was ill, and one of her children had passed away during that time.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to break the news to her while she was still ill. And so they had this avatar to basically interact with her until she got better and they could break the news to her, when she was back to full health. And clearly that opens up so many questions without, trying to pass judgment on whether that was right or wrong. It begs the question, is this a direction that we want to go? I understand how it would certainly make someone feel like that loved one was a little bit closer. But then what implications does that have in terms of our commitment to faith and the idea that they are still with us? I mean, for me, it just opened up a cornucopia of questions. Right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And in fact, Randy and I had talked about something similar to this on a different podcast. And it was about how a lot of people are identifying as a certain thing. I mean, it could be as, a male, identifying as a female, or is, in the case of our conversation, a person actually was identifying as a squirrel. Okay. So
okay.
it's one thing if a person says, I identify with squirrels, they're cute, playful, little personalities. It's something completely different when they say, I am a squirrel, you know. And it was a little bit similar when I read this article, and this fellow son said, I do not, and this is a quote, he said, I do not treat the avatar as a kind of digital person. I truly regard it as a mother. There's something about that seems to be, a little bit detached from reality, right? So it's one thing to say,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm listening to, a recording, of my mother. I'm seeing, a picture album, or I'm seeing the photos on my phone. But we know that that's a representation, right? It's still a symbolic representation. It's not actually her. So that to me is when people start having this blurring of the lines of reality, when things start becoming less normal and normal grieving and moving over into a different form of psychopathology itself.
I think what scares me about the technology is it's in its infancy.
Yeah.
And so right now of course I think it probably has an avatar, a picture of the person based on images. Obviously we already, you can do that with your iPhone now. You can use a picture and have it move its mouth, and um it it'll, you can use AI to duplicate a voice. You can have it say whatever you want. In this case, they were saying you can use it, they just need, well, I don't remember what it said, but just a few minutes of that person talking. So it's in its infancy. So right now, that mother is only telling that guy what AI's telling it to tell him based on limited information. But now in the future, and I was thinking about this earlier, Trace, because I was thinking there's this new product out called Compass. I don't know if you all have seen it. It's a necklace you wear,
Mhm.
and it records everything that you say or anyone says to you during the day. And so it records your entire conversation, and it's not an audio recording. It actually gives you the text of that. And it's billed as an assistant, so you never forget anything that happens. Okay, so what if I wear an assistant for the next year, and it gets everything that I say, all my conversations to everybody. It's able to identify those, and then you build that AI model off of that. And it's able to differentiate the conversations I've had with my children, the questions they ask me, how I responded. Well, then AI has a lot more information.
Yes.
And so then it can build a much better mimic of me. But we
Yeah.
also know that eventually, because we can already do this where they can already electronically read basic things that are going on in a person's brain.
Mhm.
So we do know that eventually we'll be able to actually read all of that. Don't know how quick that will be, but once that happens and they're able to actually download what's in my mind. And then that becomes AI produced over your phone on a screen. Then what differentiates that from me? Well, now we get into that discussion, which goes back to the religious concept of a soul. And then when you start looking at different religious traditions and even their basic differences when they discuss that, when, for instance, Buddhists say there is no I, have they come full circle then? I'm not sure. It really gets, to me, that's where we start thinking about this stuff gets scary. And if we've jumped from the point where we were last year to this today,
Yeah.
where are we going to be in a year, 10 years, and 20 years? And that's why this is what frightens me, Trace, is it doesn't frighten me. I'm sorry, I'm just used to referring to Trace by himself.
That's about all right.
But this is what frightens me is that I'm not even scared for myself. I'm afraid for my children and grandchildren. This is what's frightening, is the world that I'll leave behind because of the rapid technology gain. And especially when you think about educators, and I've known this for a long time, we can't possibly prepare students for the future. There's no way.
Right.
There's no way we can prepare them. And I don't mean that it's hopeless. We can prepare people to think and be creative, but we can't tell them what the world will be. I never would have imagined an article that talks about a guy talking to his phone as though it was his mother. That's science fiction to me.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's like Dick Tracy having a watch he could talk to.
Yep.
Yeah. The interesting thing between the two, so the story, the original story, the gentleman who had this avatar of his mother, the story about the grandmother that was hospitalized, there was actually, because they didn't have enough, to your point, right, about the availability of all the data, all the different I don't know, probably inflections of voice and mood and all those things, since they didn't have enough content to step in and emulate that person in that example, they actually had somebody similar to the things that you see on social media, where you can, kind of create an avatar and make it look like you're that person, right? I forget what you call it, right? But that second example, it was someone who was interacting like a human being, interacting live with the grandmother, but using that avatar to do so. I mean, the implications of that are are chilling. And then when you start talking about how some of these things can be used nefariously, that's really scary.
Yeah. And Alicia, that was really interesting to me too, because what made it difficult, apparently for what was the nephew, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah, the nephew, is that the guy didn't have any kind of a footprint out there on social media. They said he was a construction worker. He went to work, he lived at work, he didn't have a life outside of just construction. And so the only person they could have come in was a coworker that basically knew his personality, that could kind of step in. And they had, of course, the voice recording that the nephew had found. But you think about how much of a footprint we really do leave. And they made the comment that many times our own families really don't know as much about us as what AI does now, because it has access to big data, right? So every time that we do a search online, every time that we post something on X, right, or any podcast that we do, that all becomes a permanent product reflection of who we are, and that can easily be replicated. Again, my concern is not so much that we're trying to help someone through the grieving process, but is that the real motivation, or are we just being systematically desensitized into providing more and more and more of who we are as a soul, as a living person, being transferred over for some other purposes that we can't even imagine right now, just like Randy's talking about. We would have never thought even 10 years ago, let alone going back to our early life, when Dick Tracy was talking into his watch, that it would be the way it is now. But I think that there's, you can call me, a skeptic, but I think there are some other reasons beyond just, we're doing this out of the goodness of our heart, to help humanity. Just my thought. Yeah.
Well, and along that vein, so there was recently a headline about a huge corporation organization that bought the rights, or really kind of took over the 23andMe or the Ancestry.com data. Now, you've got folks pouring DNA and information about their family tree into this. And to your point, are they acquiring this because they want to help people connect with their long lost relatives?
Right.
Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
There were mentions of maybe, insurance reasons, right? Things that could be used to really kind of to raise the rates for folks seeking medical coverage, things like that. That's a scary thought.
Randy, I don't want to jump in on what you might be thinking on that. Just a quick interjection. That is exactly what Randy and I have talked about in other podcasts, right? In terms of like the whole overuse of diagnosis, right? That's a field that I know well. And I know that there are so many people that are being sort of herded into the medical model. They've got a couple of depressive symptoms. Now, all of a sudden you go in, you're going to get, your major depressive, kind of diagnosis, and you're going to get your script, right, for antidepressants. The concern with that is once you have that label and it's on your permanent electronic medical file, you can't get away from it. Then it becomes easy, just as you're saying, for insurance companies to say, oh, this person's a greater risk because they have a psychiatric illness, right? And so now we're going to raise the rates of companies that they're working for. That's why a lot of the EAPs, the employee assistance programs, are kind of moving by the wayside because it becomes more of a liability, right? Rather than an asset, a benefit to the company, to the corporation, because their insurance rates are raised. So, it just seems like there's some, more of an undercurrent that's going on. We want to look to the good in people and the good of the system and for looking out for us, but I don't know that we can do that anymore.
No, and even if all of these things begin with honest intentions, there's no guarantee that's how they're used ever.
Right.
I've submitted my genetic data to Ancestry, and now that you bring that up, I'm thinking you have a choice. You can erase your test. And, it might be wise to do so before it gets out. I mean, if you're doing it to find something out, find it out and then get rid of it, take it out of the database. But you're not even sure they'll take it out.
No.
But you can sure that it's not publicly available. That doesn't mean it's not going to be available somehow.
Oh my gosh, as many data leaks and things as we hear about all the time.
Right.
Yep.
And I mean, it's totally fascinating. But I want to go back to the very beginning because I want to humanize it to some degree because you talked at the very beginning about losing your mother. And I mean, that's a profound thing to happen. And I mean, and it's something that most of us, given enough years on the planet, we experience it, and not everyone gets to, but most of us get to. It's the way it should be that we get to experience the loss of our parents, and it's something you never get over. Um, it's something that you always cling to. Um, I like the Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Buddhist monk from the Vietnam War era. I mean, he lived much longer than that, of course, and wrote many books, but I love the book he wrote about his mother. I don't remember the name of it, but I love his book that he wrote about her death, because it's one that actually gave me a lot of solace about the loss of my parents, uh, because he talked about the fact that his parent, in his case of his mother, is why he was writing it, could never actually really be gone because every fiber of who he was her. He
Yes.
was her.
Yes.
And I think about that a lot. And there's so many traits that I share with my mother and father, of course. And I was asking Lupe last night just a funny question because I had a can of dog treats and I was given Twix, uh, a treat that's supposed to be healthy and keeps them from itching. And I was looking at the can and I was going, that's a great can. Uh, because I have this thing about containers. And I don't know why, but when I go to the grocery store, my shopping experience has to do with, is that a good container after it's empty or not? Uh, that to me says more about the product than what's in it. You can put screws in there or nails or whatever you need. But I was looking at that container and I was going, that's a great container. And I looked at my wife and I said, I wonder if that comes from my dad. She said, oh, no, that comes from your mom. Don't you remember? And of course, it hit me just right away that, oh, yeah, my mom saved all these little containers from the pre-made uh, cappuccino coffee, and I still have them. I mean, I got stuff in them. But anyway, but every part of me is my parents. I'll never, you can never get rid of your parents.
Yeah.
They can pass on and you'll never be rid of them ever. They're always with you. But I wanted to tell you something that happened to me about when my father passed. My father passed during open heart surgery. And the fascinating thing about his surgery was it was halfway elective. I mean, it's kind of like I took my truck to the Firestone yesterday. It's running okay, but an engine light came on and they said, you probably ought to put new spark plugs. And I said, okay. Well, I think my dad went to the doctor and he said, I'm having a hard time walking 18 holes of golf. And so the doctor said, well, you could probably do a bypass surgery and you could get through. He said, I can only do 9 holes. He said, well, you could probably do 18. Well, the guy's 72. I think at 72, I'd have a hard time walking 18 anyway. But so I don't know if it's really elective or not, but he has this surgery and it's, projected to be just totally fine. And so I wasn't going to go up there for the surgery. I was going to go after and when he was released from the hospital so I could drive him around the golf course because that was his life. And he wouldn't be able to play because of the stitches in his chest for a month. So I was going to just go hang out with him, drive him around and play cards after golf like they did every day. Anyway, so I called him the night before and we were chatting. And then I handed the phone to my wife because he loved to talk to her. My wife did something strange to the phone. Anyway, they talked for 45 minutes. And then that was the end of it. And then the next day he had the surgery and he surprisingly passed. Okay, so then I won't tell you that scene, but anyway, when that's all over and we're up there and we're trying to take care of business and get done with the funeral, I picked up my phone. And by the way, that's 2001. So I did have a cell phone, but it was archaic technology. I picked up my phone and I pushed a button and he's talking to me for 45 minutes. Whatever button she pushed, she recorded his voice.
Yeah.
And so I held on to that phone like it was something golden because it was his voice and it was his laugh. And for a long time, I feared that I would forget it because he had a laugh that would just make you laugh, big, throaty, deep from your chest chuckle. And I was just afraid that I would lose that. I still have that phone, by the way, but there's no way I'll ever be able to turn it on, even if I wanted to, because I don't think it would work. And there's no cord to plug it in, and I don't have any need to, because now I realize that I have that deep-throated laugh, and even if it doesn't sound exactly like his, it comes from the same spirit.
Right.
And it's prompted by exactly the same things that his laugh came from, because it's the same humor. So, but I understand the person in the article, and I understand the I guess the desire to have that, because who wouldn't want to talk to that parent? Who wouldn't want to have that feeling? I mean, I would
Yes, and
love
you bring
that.
up an interesting point. So one of the things that was in that article as well was something about there are some sort of memorial gardens that have the headstones have sort of a I don't know if it's like a QR
Yeah,
or
it's a
some way
QR
that
code.
it
Yeah.
is, right?
Yep.
That
QR
you can,
Yeah. QR
yeah,
code.
and sort of, a way of sort of not interacting necessarily, right, but being able to connect and experience that person. I don't know if it retains, their voice or images, but memories of that person, which I thought was beautiful. And as you're talking, Professor Brown, about those things that you brought with you from your father that are such an integrated part of who you are, and look back at that with affection and love, it takes my brain to what happens with individuals that didn't have those warm memories necessarily. What happens with folks that let's just take the gentleman with that's talking to his mother. What if their relationship was rocky? And what if he goes back to this AI organization and says, okay, well, I want you to recreate this loved one, their the avatar, their digital sort of existence, but I want you to tweak this or that because that was something that we never agreed on, or et cetera. And then they, in effect, kind of change the reality of who that person was.
Make it
It
nice.
makes me wonder.
And and too, Lisa and Randy, this is the other part, is we know that AI can hallucinate,
Yes.
right? And so let's just take the other side. Let's say that it was such a loving relationship between a mother and a son, or a father and a daughter, whatever it is. And all of a sudden now you no longer see that as something like a recording, Randy, right? It's not that. No, now you are identifying that as my mother, as my deceased father. And then all of a sudden you're going along with this great warm, fuzzy recollections, and reminiscing and having this interaction. And all of a sudden, then AI starts hallucinating and starts to say some very, very harmful things, right, to son or daughter. That's not at all what they would have said, but it's some kind of a glitch, right, in that language learning model that just kind of snaps and it just starts going off and creates something on its own. I think that to me would be one reason why I would never want to do that, to leave that for my son, my grandsons, because I couldn't guarantee that it was going to truly be genuine, even if it's 99% me. That 1% could really do some damage, and I'm all about, hey, let's don't do damage, right? So that's kind of, it may be me just saying I'm anti-tech, right? I'm anti progress, but I'm really not. I just think that just like with nuclear weapons, before we unleash these things, right, we need to make sure that we've got a handle on them. And I don't think we've done that. I know we haven't done that with nukes, and I'm certain we haven't done that with AI either.
Oh, no,
But
absolutely, because there are too many possibilities for capitalizing on it for those who stand to gain
Right.
from selling the technology in some way or another.
Yep.
and we've already released it.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
It-
So,
it-
so I want to touch on something else. So as at least in my household, there's always sort of a debate around experiences and recording those experiences, whether it be through photo, video, etc. And you'll hear a lot of talk about, no, just be in the moment. Just experience that, right? Don't try to spend the time as a spectator recording or photographing or whatever. But then the other side of that conversation is, okay, but I don't remember everything. And a lot of times video photos will capture something that I wasn't even aware of. This happens a lot with like weddings, my daughter being a photographer. There are things that are happening that that person may not even be aware of until they go back and watch the video or go back and look at the photos. Oh, I missed relative whoever. So when you talk about these sort of, digital versions of memories, I think that there needs to be kind of a realization that some of it can be positive because we don't remember everything, and because maybe, if this is done in somebody's prime, then if a loved one starts to show signs of Alzheimer's and all these other things, then you've got kind of a snapshot of who they are before they go down that road. I just don't know where we put those kind of blocks or draw those lines, right? And then the other thing is talking about AI. This is something that you both will find, I think, interesting. So there's a conversation around AI and kind of the rights of AI. So my firstborn daughter is what you call I think it's a synth engineer or a creative director. There's a few different terms for it, but basically she creates the prompts and provides the directions to AI to create art. So the art belongs to the AI. That can't be owned by anybody, but she can own the prompts that are generated to give those instructions to the AI that produces that art. And so I think that going back to this question around, memorializing people in these digital ways, at some point, there's going to be a discussion around, is that now an entity?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
for sure it will.
Yeah.
Trace, I want to say something about that art issue. Because last night I was reading on Facebook, but I'm a Facebook addict. And I don't even post very much. I just like to read, and I'm very selective about what I actually. I mean, I can kind of control it, the groups that I'm in, because I want to see certain things. I want it to be positive, and for the most part, it is. And Trace knows this already. I like to see stuff about Meher Baba, who's an Indian saint, and but last night something popped up on one of those sites, and it said stop creating pictures of Meher Baba on AI or stop enhancing them.
Mm.
And I thought, and I do that. And I was thinking, why? And then anyway, I didn't say anything because I don't get in arguments ever on there. And they said, anyway, they were, so I read through the arguments and they were saying, because Mayor Bubba said he was present in the pictures, which, first of all, I find that a little bit hard to believe. But, and then I'm thinking, so you're saying you can't, then if that's true, if he said that he was present in photographed pictures, first of all, that's ludicrous because then, so you can't put a filter on a camera because that would change it. It also means that you couldn't paint a picture of him because that would change it. And dozens and dozens and dozens of people have painted pictures of him, quite famous people in their circles, and they would all approve of the paintings. But you can't have AI create it. Why? Or alter it. You can't use. They don't like the fact that people are using enhancement software to make pictures clearer. Well, it's just nuts. And to me, I found all that stuff nuts. That's the good stuff about AI. That's the stuff that AI is meant for, is to actually enhance something for us where we get a clearer picture or a clearer understanding of something. That's the good stuff about AI. Don't take that away from us. Take away that stuff that Trace was mentioning earlier about when you push it too far. And Trace, I don't know if you've done this, or at least if you've done this, but I like to play with AI. And here's what I like to do.
No.
Because and maybe it's because I like to push elevator buttons over and over again before it comes. But I like to say, I give it a text and I'll say, reword this to sound more caring or more thoughtful or whatever. And it'll give me the text. And then I'll say, regenerate. It'll give it to me again. And I'll say, regenerate. And it'll give it to me again. I like to keep pushing that button because I think it gets frustrated, or that's how I read it,
Yeah, right.
because it does get to a point where where it starts to really stretch it. And this is what I find fascinating, because when I write something, I like to use the thesaurus a lot because I want to make sure that the words I pick have the meaning I want them to say. I think words are important.
Right.
And I think AI is just out there searching for whatever information somebody put in there or whatever it's got off the internet. It has no understanding about what a word means. It
Yeah.
can't yet. Eventually it might, but right now it doesn't. So I think you start pushing its limits, and I know it's not really frustration, but it does have limits where it starts to crack and
Yeah.
it starts to really pull away from the meaning altogether of what you really want. So how far will that AI generated grandmother go? You know, it's like asking Siri, what's the meaning of life?
Right.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
and if she would give you an answer, she won't yet, but if she would give you an answer and you tell her, well, that doesn't suffice for me. Can you tell me more? I mean, at what point is it going to crack and break and go? So I don't know. Trey, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all right. No, the other thing that I'm finding is remember back in the day when we had people that had specific learning disabilities, maybe dyslexia, and they couldn't spell. Well, then we came out with spell check, problem solved, right? Easy to compensate. Then we go along, people have a hard time, with grammar and syntax and all that good stuff and writing. Okay, fine. We come up with grammar checkers. All right, and here's where I'm finding. I don't mind washing something that I've written through a grammar checker. Hey, it's nothing wrong with that. But here's what I'm finding. Grammarly has moved from being, I think, a grammar checker that maybe they used AI before, but they really are into AI
They're
now.
connected now.
Yeah, because I can wash something through Grammarly now. And whereas what I know that what I've written is my own, it is original. But if I wash it through Grammarly a couple times, guess what? It'll come back as being plagiarized,
Yep.
right? That is insane. So people need to really be aware of how, we are using AI as a tool, or how AI is starting to use us as its tool. And going back on this notion of Elisa was talking about AI as an entity, right? Randy and I talked about this one time. I did a prompt about 3 months ago, 4 months ago, something like that, talking about how AI perceives itself. And it perceived itself as an entity. And so I went down the rabbit hole with it and saying, well, is that like, a corporation that is actually an entity in and of itself? It's not the individuals. And it came back negatory, good buddy, no, it's an entity. I am an entity on my own. And I said, well, is it like Google as a search engine? And it said, no, Google is a corporation that is an entity of itself. But Google as the search engine is not an entity. I am, right? Almost with the capital letters, at least, right? Yeah, I am.
That's like, doesn't that pass the Star Trek rules for sentient beings?
Well, interesting you say that, right? So there's a whole group of people out there that are saying if you can make AI be just like an individual, where a person couldn't tell the difference between one who has a soul and one who does not have a soul, is there any meaningful difference? For me, yes, there is, right? Because there's always some little nuance that you can tell, no matter how crafty and how eloquent AI can be. You can always tell, this was something without a soul that wrote this, right? And here's the real deal over here. So I think that, they're going to have to really do something special in order to put the soul into artificial intelligence.
Right. Because right now, all it's doing is it's able to examine what humans have written.
Right.
And that's all it's able to do right now. But it's able to examine so much at one time
Yes.
that, it can conglomerate all of that together and give you a projected idea of how you can say something. But it's just copying people now. What happens when it's no longer copying? When it becomes original? That is where it's going.
Yeah.
Well, and
That's
that's
interesting.
the whole idea behind machine learning and measuring that. I mean, at the speed at which AI is consuming information and reproducing, yeah, to your point, how long before it is just straight up producing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm.
What a conversation. This is interesting. I don't know if anybody else out there is going to find this interesting. My sense is that it will, because a couple of my new friends on X, they asked what I was up to, and I said, we're getting ready to do this podcast on this topic. And the one guy said, I would love to be a fly on the wall for that one. Right. So it's capturing people's attention. I said, don't worry, I'll send you the link once we get it posted. So, people are starting to wake up, but I'm still amazed that there are still a lot of people that are saying, professionals as well, saying, that's far down the road. We don't have to worry about that right now. I'm sorry,
Not that
it's
far.
not
So
that
I
far.
have another question or thought, right, to pose. As we're talking about this, loved ones and those memories and creating representations, my mind goes to, I was raised Roman Catholic, and my mind goes to a lot of the conversations around veneration of saints and what different faith systems believe about what happens with the soul and all of that. So I guess my mind went to, what if somebody decided, okay, I'm going to look up this company in Taiwan and I'm going to ask them to produce a digital avatar for me of Jesus or of, the Virgin Mary. And because I want to have this to interact with, to pray every day. And it starts to cross some lines within the bounds of the tenets of the faith, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what your sense is on it, Randy, but I would see that as being blatant idolatry at that point. Because,
And that's how the church would say it, I'm sure.
there you go. Right, right. And some people, may be okay with that. Personally, I wouldn't be. Now, at the same time, I'm not nearly as strict as what some people are. Okay. I mean, I will wear, my cross, right? And I have been for years and years. But at the same time, some people will say, well, that's idolizing the cross instead of idolizing Christ, right? And it's like, well, no, I don't think so, right? It's just, it's a reminder every morning that I need to pick up my cross. I put it over my head, right? I pick up my cross and follow Christ, right? So it's it's something that's symbolic, but it becomes tangible. It becomes practical when I put it on. I don't worship it, and it's not something that I idolize. It's just a reminder. And if people were able to take something like AI generated and it becomes something that reminds them, that's okay. But we're already finding out that people can't separate, real from illusion. And that's when it becomes harmful, I think, psychologically, emotionally, and potentially spiritually.
I think it's a really curious idea. And I think one of the things that would be fascinating to me, okay, let me just tell you how I feel about it straight up. Here it is. Okay, now if there was a AI Bible that if if it was if I could ask it a question and it gave me a Bible verse that was potentially relevant to the question, that would be kind of an AI Bible, which by the way exists anyway.
Definitely. Yeah.
And truthfully has existed for hundreds of years. I mean, they've been writing concordances and exhaustive what do they call them, Trace?
Yeah.
Systematic theologies.
Yeah.
Have been written for hundreds of years about the Bible. I mean, if those were just electronic versions of those kinds of things, could be simply turned into AI, and they are already there, I'm sure. But see, that's something different because those are actual words about a document that have been approved by specific entities. Like, let's just say, for instance, the Catholic Church. They've approved a certain version of the Bible, including the Apocrypha, and they'll use several different versions, including the King James version, probably with the Apocrypha, and they'll probably use a couple other versions that they technically will say are model versions. I think there's nothing wrong with that. That I would think is fine. If you look at some of the saints, Benedict, for instance, who left a lot of writings. You could do the same thing with that. Saint Francis didn't leave nearly as many, but there is a Franciscan rule, but I'm not sure how much of that he wrote. Saint Teresa, there's quite a bit of her writing available. Unfortunately, she's no longer here, but there's probably quite a bit of recording of her available. I think those kinds of AIs that are reliant on trusted sources, that we know exactly those were the words they said, or exactly the things they did, I don't have a problem with that. If it's just simply spitting out what that person did, it's kind of like when you read the red letter version of the Bible and it puts the words of Jesus in red. Okay, I've never had a problem with that. Some people don't like that. I don't know why, but I've never had a problem with that. It's just, okay, these are the words that are attributed to Jesus. Well, I think maybe there's some discussion about whether or not he actually said it. I don't know. I'd accept it as far as I'm concerned. But if it's based on those kind of recognized things by church tradition or groups' traditions, I don't have a problem with them creating whatever AI tool they want as long as they stick within those rules. That's not a problem. The problem is they'll go outside of it. That's the problem. And the problem with the AI in general is that it extrapolates from a given set of parameters and then it'll make up its own answer. So if you give it the Bible, it's going to combine a whole bunch of things and say, well, it makes sense to your question that this is the answer. And it's combined to 5,000 verses to come up with a new answer that wasn't there. Well, that may not be correct. That that's why I think the church has always relied on some kind of systematic theology to think about that. And I know different traditions have their own systematic theology. I don't have a problem. I know they're different, but it's how they view it and it's how they want the people that follow them to view it. And I think that that's great because it gives them a structure to rely on. I don't think you can fault something that sticks with the actual words of somebody, but something that extrapolates from that is already one step beyond it. I don't know at what points you say you've gone beyond it. It's kind of
Yes, well, if the difference between a reproduction, right, and a reinterpretation,
right,
and how will people know the difference?
right. And I think it's what they argue about the Constitution all the time over those issues.
Hmm.
They are, I mean, and I think by nature humans argue about it. We've been arguing about the Bible since they codified it and put it together and said this is it. And I
Yeah.
mean, we've been arguing about it since then. So, and arguing about, well, didn't you forget this book? And but still, we all pretty much know what collectively the sense of the world is. This is the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And
You
this
know,
is the Quran, and this is, I mean,
yeah.
we collectively know those things, but and we still argue about it. So, but if they stuck to those things, I don't have a problem. But we don't know enough about Saint Aquinas. Uh, we don't have enough of his words to be sure of that. And if forget that, what about Saint Nicholas? Because there's the one that I really want to talk about, because half the church believes he's just tradition. The other half believes that he was real, but he's buried in two different places, or he was buried in one place and they stole his bones and took him to another place. And who knows if he wasn't real, who's that poor guy they took? Anyway, that's a whole nother story, but we don't have his words enough to build an avatar, but we sure enough have built an avatar him.
Yeah.
And he's
You,
been telling us things wrong forever. Okay, and I play one.
yeah, you do, and you play one well, right? You
Yeah,
know, and that actually isn't a role you play. That's just who you are.
that's right.
So, yeah, you are Santa Claus. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, one thing that I was taking some notes as I was listening to the two of you on this is, you know, we go back to the notion that words matter, right? Individual words, collective words, sentences, paragraphs, books, and so on. And so, you know, we as humans, you know, in terms of our faith, just taking, you know, Christianity, you know, whatever. You know, we didn't need AI to be able to give us a reason to change things. I just found this morning, right? So I'm doing a Bible study on wisdom, a single meaningful word. Well, if I look at the King James Version, right, I will see wisdom showing up much more, right, going all the way back into the Old Testament. But when I look at the same verses in the ESV, guess what? Wisdom isn't wisdom, it's considered skill.
Hmm.
Now, in my mind, there's a big difference between wisdom as a single meaningful word and skill as a single meaningful word, right? And so, when you read it in context, you can stand back from it, at 1,000-foot elevation and say, okay, I get what the author is saying. The spirit and the intent of this is the same. But do both of you took typing in high school, maybe? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I quit on typing and went to something else because my old girlfriend was in a different class. One of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life. Okay. I should have stayed in typing class. But the point is this. You remember the exercise, the quick brown fox jumps over the, right? I guess that's when I left the class. But
Moon.
you get the picture, right? So, if we were to change the quick brown fox, not jumps, but we change it to leaps, all right, over the whatever. The spirit and the intent is still the same. Even the actual count, the frequency count of letters in that practice is the same, but it changes the meaning of it, right? Because the quick brown fox jumps over the, right, is hitting all of the letters apparently on the keyboard. If you change it to leaps, you're all of a sudden duplicating. So it's the same, but it's not the same. And that is, I think, one of the real significant differences that we're getting in terms of this systematically desensitized into some, artificial version of humanity rather than, right, what we've got, the split between AI and humanity. Now we're getting this merge, right? There's a merge that's happening. And that's what I think is dangerous. And people aren't even aware of it. They just kind of blindly follow and say, oh, the spirit and the intent is the same. Well, no harm, no foul. No harm, no foul until there is.
Yeah.
Completely. It's just like the notion of color. I'm language and color, that they're kind of on the same wavelength in my mind.
Yeah.
Pink can be fuchsia, it can be dusty rose, it can be a million carnation, it can be so many different variations and shades and intensities. And the words are the same. Language, to find just the right words to convey a precise meaning, I think is the beauty behind all of written art, right? Poetry, music, lyrics to songs, those kind of things. And I think that it is, I do agree that that's lost. To a great degree, people do not place the value on getting just the right word.
Yeah.
People don't always appreciate the nuance in a different color, a different sound. And those are vitally important pieces of what make us, human beings.
Yeah, boy, amen. Randy, I think we selected the right guest for this podcast, don't you?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I want to pick at your word. I don't know that we selected her.
Right.
I think it's like friends, Trace. We don't get to pick them. They happen upon us. They are gifts from God.
Yeah.
And I think that we were just allowed to be graced by Lisa's presence. And I hope that she will come and join us again.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And for everybody that's out there that might be watching this now or in the future, all of us may be dead and gone. Who knows? Right? But the fact is, we all now agree that once a friend, always a friend. And so if you're watching this, you're part of this. Elise is now the continuing once a friend, always a friend. So is Randy, so am I. And so all of you are welcome to join into this adventure that we've got that we're calling Nomads of the Noetic.
And if you're going to make an avatar of any of us, pick Elisa.
Yeah, no kidding.
She's more fun. She's smarter.
Clearly.
Well, thank you
Yes.
both so much for having me here. I've enjoyed this tremendously, and I look forward to many more of these
Well,
enriching.
well, good. We will have you back for sure, and we'll link that article in the description of this video.
You bet.
And I hope that you will join us again. And Trace, I just want to tell everybody that I pray that they'll have a blessed week and come back and see us again.
Same here. Adios all. Thanks again, Elise. We'll see you.
Take
See you,
care.
Randy.